The Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Alastair, welcome to Consulting Leaders.
Nice to be with you. Great.
It's gonna be a fun one. Tell me what brought you into the fantastic yet stressful world, I know I've been there myself, of advising professional and financial services firms. What got you into this?
Really good question. So I actually started my career as a teacher. So I taught 11 to 18-year-olds English. So, Hamlet and all the great works, but fell out of love with that. But that was a really great training ground, actually, in many ways for a career in consulting, not least giving you the kind of experience and confidence to stand up in front of a group of a difficult audience to try and engage them. So that was the kind of early part of my career, and then I moved, as I said, away from teaching, did various things, but got introduced to Ben Kent, who's the founder at Meridian West, where I am at the moment, and that was around 16 years ago. He founded the business back in 2001. And just really, excuse me, just was really captivated by the kind of work. As you say, kind of professional services firms, B2B organizations are the key clients that we work with. And, certainly over the last couple of decades, they've been through a huge amount of change. And, the opportunity to play a small part in that has been really exciting, and the work evolves and changes, and that's something that I didn't feel like I was getting from a teaching career, but I'm certainly getting from a consulting one.
That's an interesting background from teacher to advisor. I mean, I guess there is a dimension of teaching as a consultant for sure. Patience is required.
Definitely. Yeah.
What problem do you solve now, Alastair? Like, what is it that you help people achieve?
Sure. So we, as I said, work with professional services, B2B organizations. I mean, one might take a look at that industry and say, actually, certainly over the last couple of years, the last decade, they've, as an industry, has grown significantly. Do they need help? Well, actually, I would argue they do. In many cases, that growth has been serendipitous. It's not necessarily been as strategically achieved as it could have been. So one of the things that we help those kind of firms do is really understand what's driving changes amongst their market, amongst the client organizations and sectors in which they work, and use that insight and information to help them make decisions about their strategy, about their client experience, so how they're engaging with their clients on a day-to-day basis. And that's helping them to continue that growth trajectory that many have been on successfully over the last couple of years. But we know that the industry is changing, as I mentioned, fundamentally, really, and that brings a whole host of pressures, competitive pressures, disruptive pressures. We're certainly going into and are in an environment where we can't just rely on the economic climate to kind of create a wave of growth for us. So these firms are changing a lot, and we're helping them through that change by giving them real clear guidance on what the future looks like for the markets in which they work.
So who's the decision maker in all this? I mean, so you have multiple ICPs, I understand. I mean, multiple type of companies you're going to work with.
Sure.
But then who is it that you're trying to get into a room with to be like, this is your problem, this is my solution, let's do some stuff together? Who's the ICP?
Yeah. Good question. So quite often quite often we work with the kind of CMO, chief marketing officer, chief BD officer. Some firms are particularly at the larger end of the market, do have strategy functions, so they'll have a kind of chief strategy officer. Increasingly, many are actually creating new roles, so chief growth officer, chief client officer, with responsibility for that growth and insight agenda. So often they are the people who are they've got a seat at the board table. They're influencing strategic decisions about the growth of the firm and what that can look like. And so quite often they are the people that we are connecting into. For some firms, we have good relationships with their managing partners, CEOs. Increasingly, a number of firms, as you probably well know, are getting external capital investment. So, they may have a PE funder, and a number of times we have a relationship with a number of those firms, and we get introduced to their portfolio businesses, and clearly they have their own interests which they're looking to achieve there. So it's quite a diverse audience, but typically it's around the kind of strategy, marketing, business development, client functions, those that have a role to play in developing strategy and how the firm works with its clients.
So we're going to take a bit of a tangent here, Alastair, but
Yep.
I'm curious to get your take on this. I believe it's OpenAI right now who's recruited 100 top-level financial analysts to help their AI model, perform financial analysis. Basically, when you think about all the disruption that AI is bringing, everybody's talking about AI. We get it. It's we know the jobs and so on. Cool.
We've heard it all. Yep.
Exactly. How do you advise professional advisory firms on strategizing? There is the fact that maybe the junior analysts are not going to be that much required anymore. How do we keep on feeding the pyramid properly? How do we attract talent? What do you see happening in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, really good question. And I'd love to say that I've got all the answers to that, but certainly I think what's really interesting, and I spend a lot of my time speaking to essentially buyers of the services that these firms are providing, whether that's CFOs, CEOs, others who are procuring and working with professional advisors. And I think what's really interesting is there's been a evolution, certainly in the last couple of decades, but certainly in the last 5 years since the start of this decade, around how those buyers of services really expect to work with consultants, professional advisors. And what they're telling me is, in many cases, the rate at which those firms are changing their business model or responding to those changing needs is not fast enough, right? So there's a big problem in terms of how quickly these firms can pivot, and part of that, as I'm sure you know, is the partnership model and the way that talent is developed and trained and retained and grown. Big part of that is the kind of the financial incentives in the billing model, etc. But to answer your question, what I think's really interesting is we've seen over the last couple of years, some quite big external forces, actually continue to accelerate the pace of change. So we're kind of now in a position where if you're, as a firm, not responding to these, you're going to be losing out significantly in terms of opportunities. So AI is obviously one of those, but talent retention development, I think, is a really interesting one. Just to give you a quick example on that. So we've done some research with the University of London. And one of the things that involved is going out, speaking to people who are either at the early stage of their career in law or are looking to enter the legal profession. So maybe they're studying for a legal degree or a kind of legal qualification at the moment. And what's very interesting is how the expectations of that new generation who are just about to or who have just entered the profession are changing, and also what is motivating them to develop in that career. And those expectations, I think, are not necessarily being reflected in the choices that all firms are making as to how they respond to that. So yeah, lots to unpick there, but I think there's a huge amount of change which creates opportunity, but it also means that you can't, even the most successful firms can't rest on their laurels, because I hear from clients all the time that they want firms to move faster in all of these areas.
And we have the tools nowadays to be faster, so it is only fair. It's interesting. I'm very curious to know, and we're going to talk about the business of consulting, obviously. But I think it's somehow linked. I'm thinking about my former employer, obviously PwC, and I'm like, is the pyramid, the partnership model, gonna be the way forward? Really, if you, it's not only promote from within, right? You can bring in
Mm,
a partner from another firm, typically some senior managers and so on. But at the
yep.
end of the day, the ones that I've seen performing the best are the ones who've been groomed from the get-go.
Mm,
But since that whole recruitment phase is being disrupted right now, not that it's not happening anymore, but like it's heavily impacted. Yeah, strategy wise, the
mm,
organizational structure is going to be very interesting. Cool.
yep.
That's it. Tell me about, because that's what you do. Tell me about your marketing. How do
Mm,
you um, brands, markets, make people solution aware, problem aware, educate
mm.
them? How do you get into the rooms with the CMOs, all the strategic partners, strategic decision makers who are going to decide to go with Alastair, you're my man.
Yep.
Um, how do you do that?
So a lot of our marketing, business development, sales essentially is driven by sharing insight and sharing information. I think as an organization and as a sector really, but certainly one of the things at Meridian West that we try and do is be the voice of, best practice, what's going on in the industry, helping make connections, being generous with our kind of views and perspective and time. And what that looks like in practice is a range of things. So the simple things like webinars and kind of broadcast is great. We put a lot of articles and blogs and information out there for people to find. But one of the things we find most effective is actually facilitation. So it's bringing groups of people together. So typically we might have a lunch or a breakfast, and we might have, let's say, 8 or 10 CMOs around the table from a range of different industries. And we might have a theme. So we might say, look, let's explore how are we as an industry and you as firms actually using uh, taking a more data-driven decision making to strategy, and kind of laying out on the table, here are some of the things that we've seen, and then getting everybody to excuse me, share what they're doing, share common challenges, ask each other questions. So we're part of that conversation. We're obviously sharing our expertise. We can talk about the things that we do, but it's done in a very open way so that people feel comfortable and they want to share and they want to kind of make those connections, because ultimately the industry that we work in, we have great relationships that we've built over decades. And we're very fortunate that we've got lots of clients that we've worked with for many years, and we want to showcase them. We want to tell the market what they're doing. So a lot of what we do is case studies, profiling people, bringing people onto conversations like this where we can allow them a platform to talk about what they do. And all of that helps to share knowledge, helps to position us as experts. But ultimately, it means that we're being, you know, generous with our insight and our time. And obviously, through those conversations, we can start to listen for what are the problems that people are facing, where there might be, opportunities for us to engage, talk more deeply, take that to a one-on-one setting. So those are some of the things that have been most successful for us, I would say.
Tell me a bit more about organizing those lunches
Mm.
with, CMOs. I think so. I only had one other guest on this show tell me about dinners that she was organizing on a
Yep.
quarterly basis. She was making sure to invite people
Mm.
from different, like the industries and titles, but still people she would potentially do business with. And she
Yep.
would not only come across as the connector, but also the
Yep.
one who would have the solution to the thematic approach in those dinners, which in my opinion is very smart. So how do you do that when you get people, similar people in the sense of title, in a
Mhm.
room? How do you go about organizing that? What's the incentive for them to come? Tell me more.
Yeah, so really great question, and so to kind of root this in reality, so we've got a couple of sessions coming up next month, one in Toronto, one in New York, one in London, around this topic of client insight and how firms can do that. So at the moment, what we've been doing is a combination of reaching out to people in our network, so people we know, people that we've had conversations with, people we know, this is an issue that they're wanting to address, and inviting them, and positioning it, as I said, as an opportunity to hear from us as experts, but also hear from each other. But we also use that as an opportunity to reach out to people we might know less well. So people, I may have met last year at a conference, or we may have had, an initial conversation with, and we haven't heard from for a couple of months. It's a great way to kind of reconnect and say, look, we're facilitating this, come along. The sessions themselves, as I said, very open. We encourage people to talk, and we find that people are very open. Actually, they're willing to talk and share information because they know that there's a quid pro quo there. They get insight back and can ask each other questions. But we'll often try and have maybe a short case study, or we'll have somebody who can talk a little bit about what they're doing to start the conversation. So in these upcoming sessions we've got next month, for example, I'm co-facilitating those with a colleague, Brenda. She's a former CMO at one of the largest law firms in North America. She's got a huge, credibility track record in talking about the issues that we're going to be talking about. So she can help to kind of lay out some of that perspective, and then we will, invite others to share their perspectives and kind of facilitate the conversation that way. But it's done in a relatively informal setting. It's over a lunch or a breakfast. People feel at ease. People feel like they're getting value from it.
I like the idea of bringing in an ally, an inside woman in your case, who will be kind of facilitating. So you're not just coming across as the third party vendor who would be coming in being like, we all know why we're doing this. Like, hey, this is co-built with someone like you. I like that a lot. This is the same principle that we follow with the podcast. So definitely vibe with that. Tell me more about the sales cycles, Alastair. So how do you go from those launches, right? That's actually a very good concrete example. All the content that you put out, the marketing assets, the speaking, how do you go from that to an actual, sales conversation, potentially second, third, because we know sales cycles are long, an SOW, a letter of engagement. What does the sales motion look like for you?
So I'd love to tell you it's all really quick and all really easy, but that would be not the truth. Yeah, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, sales cycles, particularly when working with the kind of clients we do, are long, and not always, but often. And there are often good reasons for that. It's about getting buy-in. It's about getting engagement, budget, and those things take time. I think the things that work well for us in terms of that sales cycle are kind of moving people through, obviously, those kind of initial engagements that we talked about, inviting them to a kind of session where they're with their peers. We'll always try and encourage then a one-to-one follow-up on that. So even if that's with people, we've got a good relationship with, it's a good opportunity just to kind of hear their reflections, what resonated, what kind of ideas have they taken away, where might there be kind of challenges that they still need help. But, again, it's about, as we try and move people towards a more formalized, whether that's an RFP or a kind of more formalized idea of an initiative or a project where we can help, is giving them information again. So one of the things that we draw on quite a lot is benchmarking. So we have a number of initiatives that we run where we'll ask people to, for example, complete a short benchmark. So we have one that's called Climb, and that's basically looks at how firms are using data and client insight to drive commercial decision making. So really simple. It's about 10 minutes for people to complete, but they basically complete a short survey, tell us about some of the things that they're doing, what their aspirations are, and we can then create a really simple report for them, which says, look, here's where the kind of market average is, if you like. This is what, best practice looks like. Here's what the leaders are doing. And here's where you sit in that maturity framework. And that can be really great for crystallizing particular needs or problems. So gives people a sense, because again, it's backed by data. So we've had around 200 firms that have completed that benchmark over the last couple of years. And we can sit down with people and talk through that data and say, look, the challenges that you're facing, you're not alone. The majority of your peers are facing these. But actually what we know from firms who are more mature or further ahead in this journey, they tend to do particular things. And here's some ideas around how you might get started. So on that theme of really sharing insights, sharing knowledge, it can help to, again, crystallize the need, help people understand what that pathway forward looks like, so that they can then take that data, to the rest of their leadership team and say, hey, look, we are actually further behind than we thought, or there's an issue here that we need to address, and we've got some real evidence to tell us kind of where we sit in the market, and people love that.
I mean, so what I often say on the show is, if you manage to, we live in a trust recession world. So any sales cycle that allows you to further build authority, trust, credibility, like almost starting the walk with the clients, whilst getting there, not giving them all the secret sauce, obviously, but like building together. And most importantly, and people don't like to do that, and I know a lot of consultants struggle with sales because of that, but like making them sit in the pain a bit, like,
Yep.
oh, those are your stats. I mean, you guys are doing great, but for that particular aspect, those are your stats. Well, here is what we know these stats typically looks like in a well-performing, insert here the name of the company. It's like, oh, okay, hey, here is what it could look like in terms of actual revenues, benefits, whatever we end up selling. If you were to fix that, let's rock and roll. And if you manage to build that together with them, rather than just saying them, this is your problem, this tends to convert really, really, really well.
Yeah. And I think, big part of what you say also is about building comfort. It's building that relationship. A lot of the work that we do involves, sitting down with clients of the organizations we work with. As I said before, they're often very senior individuals, having time with senior people in the firm, and there's, as you said, a degree of trust that, you're not going to just open the door without doing your due diligence. And part of that due diligence is trying to get an understanding of what it would be like to work together. And that's where I think, having those opportunities to kind of sit down with people, share ideas, hopefully helps us position that level of kind of trust and comfort early on in the relationship.
Amen to that. One of the things that I learned when I was myself a consultant servicing people like you, Alastair, I mean, the same people that you service,
Yep.
Is we were, the partner who taught me everything was like, Guillaume, there are two types of consultants. There are the hunters and there are the farmers. And he was like, I'm a hunter. I love the smell of fresh blood in the morning. I love to go after new business. That's my jam.
Yep.
I was like, but the partners bringing in the most money, the ones actually making it rain and growing the fastest, are the farmers. And by the way, hunter farmer is like, it's not a like good or bad. It's just like two categories.
Yep.
It's like the ones who are able to take that initial engagement, over deliver, and transform it into a multi-layered, multi-year project with all the teams from the firm. Those were the most successful ones because this is where the money is. How do you farm, Alastair?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely subscribe to that philosophy. I think, as I said, we're very fortunate in that we do have, multi-year engagements, multi-year relationships with a lot of clients, but, we don't, you have to work hard to get that, right? And so part of that is about the trust building. Part of that is about delivering. So, making sure in those early stages of the relationship of the work, you're absolutely delivering what you say you will. Because, loyalty is hard won, but quickly lost. And, in this environment, I think loyalty is going to be under increasing pressure, even for those that are doing great work. So, it takes real effort, but there are things that we do certainly in terms of sales and business development, and really coaching and working with people in our team. So we have consultants, senior consultants, associate directors who are great at basically being the face of those client relationships often, and with that comes responsibility for fostering that relationship. And that means that making sure you're listening to what the client needs, you're receptive to how they're changing, you're inquisitive to what's going on in their business, you're asking for introductions, or you're sounding out kind of the people that you should be getting to know, and all of that kind of has to be done intentionally. If you're going to be a farmer, in your analogy, you've got to kind of intentionally farm, and there's no one thing that'll get you there, but it's a combination of all of those behaviors, and it's certainly something that we really try and instill in people very early on in their career at Meridian West. If you're going to grow and you want to be the tomorrow's farmer. These are the things that you can do from day one to help you get there.
I like that. Do you have some specific mechanisms that you can share with us? Like, hey, at every milestones we do X, Y, Z, and we identify the next gap, and we do this or that or this. When we deliver this type of service, we know that typically something that goes well after that to like kind of keep the maintenance and the lights on is this. Like, do you have such things, or is it purely like value driven? Sit down with the clients. How do you go about that?
Yeah, so we will do very regular kind of so particularly for clients that we work with on kind of retained or multi-year basis, we'll have key milestones during that process where we'll kind of sit down and reflect, and we'll say, look, let's think about the work that's been delivered over the last 6 months. Where have we got to? Are we kind of falling behind? Are we kind of ahead of expectations? What's changed? What's next? And part of that is reflecting on what's happened and learning from that, but it's also about planning for the future. So again, that's done quite intentionally, and it's making time for that with the right people. But then it's also, we as a business have to make sure that we're continually innovating and thinking about new ways that we can work with and add value to our clients. So obviously some of that is as technology is changing, being at the forefront of that and bringing value in that space, but it's also on the kind of change management side of things. So we have been pretty successful on that side, but again, that's something that we're always evolving what we do, bringing people into our network who've got great expertise that we can introduce clients to. So we're not precious about the relationships that we have. If there are people that we know can do great work in partnership with us that we can introduce clients to, I think that's that creates value for everybody concerned. So yeah, a whole range of things, but again, it goes back to that intentionality. I think you have to make time for it, you have to diarize it, you have to think about it, you have to give yourself as an individual space to think about it. Otherwise you get too lost in the weeds in the day-to-day.
Yeah, I think so I like that a lot, and I'm gonna echo it with some of the terms that we like to use. It's just having an abundance mindset. And when we think about, especially, so there are some firms that rely solely on referrals. I talk often enough on this podcast what I think about relying only on referrals, so we're not gonna touch upon this again. But it's like sometimes they're gonna complain that their partners are not sending them enough referrals, and the question I often have for them is, well, how many referrals did you send last month to other partners? And when you're like willingly when you're willingly introducing other people, making sure that you get your partners referrals as well. This is how you create that abundant mindset. We cannot have it all, and being willing to share is, in my opinion, a very, very sound strategy.
Yeah.
A bit of a curveball for you, Alastair.
Go on.
What's your number one challenge? What's the thing that is your challenge right now?
Good question. I think there's probably the kind of biggest thing at the moment is, as a business, we have grown very rapidly and we continue to grow, and with that always comes discussions and conversations about how you make sure our model kind of keeps pace with that growth. So we're not under investing in new talent, in delivery, but we're not overstretching ourselves. So there's always a question there about how that's managed, but that's that's an exciting challenge to have. So to give you a sense, we've just since the start of this year, we've brought in 2 new analysts who are doing great. They've been with us since the start of January, and investing the time to kind of build and grow the team. But it's it's critical. We have to make sure we're kind of fully resourced to do a great job for our clients, and it can take time to find the right people, to get them onboarded and to make sure they're delivering. But that's a big challenge. It's just I think we've got a clear sense of where we want to go. We're ambitious for growth, but it's making sure that we've got the structure and the resourcing to deliver on that successfully.
I like that. Ambitious for growth. I
Mm,
mean, consulting, especially when you start going higher up the levels, is really a talent business. It's
mm.
a recruitment, hiring, and training business. Like if
Yes,
you
yeah,
have the talents and the experts in your team, this just snowballs and you get more engagement. So once the acquisition is even remotely fixed, it's finding the right talent, retaining them, and making every people grow.
mm.
Alastair Beddow, ladies and gentlemen. Alastair, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should
Yep.
they go?
Yep. So search for Meridian West. So Meridian West, you can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us at meridianwest.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn as well, Alastair Beddow. Yeah, reach out, connect with me. Love to hear what people think of the conversation today and pick up anything that's resonated with people.
We'll put all the links in the description. I can say one thing for sure is that you've gained at least one new connection on LinkedIn out of this interview, Alastair.
Great.
Me, I just added you. Thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time. How